It's a Marvel Monday. I asked you which Marvel videos did you want to see from me, and you picked most underutilized MCU characters. These are the heroes, the villains, the side characters that should have been or could have been so much cooler than they were. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share the MCU characters that you think didn't live up to their potential, that could have been so much cooler. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, one more thing before we get started, I have a companion video to this over on my Patreon page with 9 more characters that I think were underutilized inside the MCU. Join over on Patreon at any level, and you can unlock that video and a whole bunch of others, and let's get started. Kicking things off is Whiplash, when they announced that Mickey Rourke, coming off The Wrestler, was going to be the main villain in Iron Man 2. It sounded like the right casting at the right time. Then the trailers debuted, and you saw him with his whip arms, tearing cars up, and it just seemed like we were going to get another great, menacing comic book villain. And then we saw the movie, and it didn't really live up to any of the potential. Even the opening scene of the movie sets up this great scenario where you have someone who has a history with the Stark family, feels betrayed, but is an intellectual equal to Tony Stark. And then the character himself just sits in labs for the vast majority of the runtime of the film, talking about how he wants his bird. Get me his bird. No, drones. Let's do drones. He's just sitting in labs, and so all the potential is wasted. There's only 2 action sequences with him, and the big one, finale one at the end with War Machine is really, really short, and you can just only imagine how much better this character could have been. Number 9, Starhawk and the Ravagers. When I heard that Sylvester Stallone was going to be in the sequel to Guardians of the Galaxy, my head basically exploded with excitement. And then I saw the movie, and he basically has an extended cameo where he's introduced in the beginning of the film, and then he shows up right there at the end, and then they give him a post-credit scene where he's sitting there with this group of other Ravagers played by Michelle Yeoh, Ving Rhames, Michael Rosenbaum, and one of them is voiced by Miley Cyrus. And you can just see the cast of another movie right here. This whole world of people that I would love to see them do more with. They have all the talent, they had all the characters, and they're just used for a post-credit scene and a couple of little dialogue bits throughout the film. And I just hope someday we get to see more from this batch of characters, because if you're going to cast this talent with such cool characters, why wouldn't you do more with them? Next up, A-list actresses cast as forgettable love interests. I kind of cheated on this one. It's more a category, but we've got Liv Tyler, Rachel McAdams, and then Natalie Portman all playing these love interests where they don't do anything at all interesting with their characters. They're just there to have someone be romantic with the lead character. Especially with Jane Foster, she's established as being a brilliant scientist, and then as soon as we move into the Avengers, she's not even there. Stellan Skarsgård, he shows up in the film, but they have to put Jane Foster off somewhere else. She shows up in Thor: The Dark World, and she's just there to be the love interest that gets messed up in this big plan involving the ether or whatever. But they got great actresses that have chemistry with the leads, but they didn't write a character that was interesting, and so it's just totally wasted talent. Like, I frequently forget that Rachel McAdams is in the MCU, and I really enjoy Rachel McAdams. I didn't mind her character. They just did nothing at all to make her memorable. Number 7, Scarlet Witch. Now, this is a character that's made a whole bunch of appearances since the end of Phase 2, but she's always a secondary character. She's never given kind of a big story that's front and center. Of course, she started as a villain in Age of Ultron and kind of gets that redemptive arc as she becomes a hero. She realized that she's being used by the people around her, but then in Civil War, she's very prominent in the opening sequence. Then they just lock her away at a base for the entire midsection of the film, and she becomes kind of an afterthought after that point in time. Then we go into Infinity War, and she's off kind of in hiding, and then she's off running. And while she's this incredibly powerful character, played by a great actress, they didn't haven't given her enough to do yet. Hopefully, once WandaVision comes out, I can remove her from this list and they'll give her a story worthy of her character. Then we have Bill Foster, Goliath. This one is easy to forget, but they cast Lawrence Fishburne in Ant-Man and the Wasp as a former superhero, Goliath, who worked with Hank Pym. They had this whole rivalry between the two of them. And they talk about it. They talk about the fact that he got up to 25 feet tall, but they don't show us any of this. They don't do anything with it. So you get Morpheus cast in the MCU as a superhero, and it's literally just stuff we talk about. They sit at a table and crack jokes about who got bigger. That's all they did with all of the potential of this, when in these movies they did flashback sequences where we saw Hank Pym on some missions, and they could have given us something with this character. Don't just tease that it happened. In fifth place is Falcon. Ever since Captain America the Winter Soldier, whenever Steve Rogers shows up, so does Falcon, and that's a little bit of the problem here, that he comes off like Steve Rogers' sidekick. Instead of being a character in and of himself with his own character arcs, stories, adventures that he's going on, instead, he's just the guy that's always helping out Steve Rogers, and so he feels underdeveloped and like they've never let him really go out on his own, at least up to this point in time. Even when he showed up in Ant-Man, it felt like they wanted to have an Avengers cameo and they couldn't get any of the main Avengers, so they went like, well, I guess we could put Falcon in the movie. Even that cheapens the character a little bit for me. Once again, because he's got a TV show coming up, I'm hoping we're going to get some great stories and we'll finally get to see this character in action and who he really is. Then we have the Warriors 3. This one might be the most offensive one on the list, as these are Thor's trusted companion, this elite set of warriors from Asgard meant to protect the people of Asgard, and then they're constantly underutilized. They appear basically just as Thor's friend in the original film, and then they swap one of them out going into the second one with Zachary Levi, and they're so poorly used in these films that no one even noticed that this happened. And then you go into Thor Ragnarok and they're just killed flippantly. They're no longer these elite warriors. They're just wiped out quickly, don't even pause, don't spend a second to reflect on their deaths. Thor's best friends are gone, and we're back to cracking jokes. So they take these characters that are supposed to be the best of the best in Asgard, and they just toss them away. And it's so frustrating that these characters never got to do anything particularly interesting, even though you got some good actors in there with Zachary Levi, a former Punisher as one of them, and then they're just killed off like that. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to share your picks down below in the comments section. I'd love to know which characters did you want to see given more screen time, more to do, and a better character arc. Also, remember after this video, I do have a companion video over on my Patreon page with 9 more characters that I thought weren't treated right in the MCU. If you've enjoyed this video, you'll enjoy that one too. In third place is the Mandarin. In Iron Man 2, they created a new version of the Mandarin that's kind of this terrorist. They took out some of the more fantastical elements of the character, and they gave us this MCU version of Iron Man's ultimate nemesis in the comic books. And then it turned out, just kidding, subverted your expectations. He's just a doofus actor, and replaced him with Killian, and the movie says that Killian is the real Mandarin. And you were just kind of left being like, oh, clever, but not better. I don't like what you did right here with that. And this is an odd one to put on the list because on the one hand, they did give us a Mandarin, and the one I was excited for that's underutilized doesn't really exist. He was just a performance, a character that was created, but they came up with a good take for the actual Mandarin that would be true to the comics while being a modernization that fits in this universe. and then they wasted it just to trick the audience, just to subvert our expectations. And so we're left frustrated that we never really got the comic book version of the Mandarin done in any sort of proper version, in any sort of way that honors the material that came before in this character that's so important in the comics. That's frustrating, and so of course he belongs in the top 3. Our runner-up is Vision. When they first introduced him in Age of Ultron, he was such a cool character. He casually just lifts up Mjolnir, hands it to Thor as this great payoff to the sequence earlier in that film. He does some awesome stuff in the final showdown, has some great dialogue with Ultron before wiping him out, and then afterwards, they didn't know what to do with him, probably because they thought that he was too powerful. So then we get to Civil War, and he's locked in a base, wearing sweaters and cardigans. He accidentally shoots War Machine that hurts War Machine, but doesn't kill War Machine. And then we get to Infinity War, and it's like they had to nerf him down immediately so that they could get the stone out of his head. So he's seriously injured in the first half of the film, killed at the end of it, and the character is totally wasted. And essentially, since Age of Ultron, the most interesting thing about him is that he's in a relationship with Scarlet Witch, which is not a very interesting thing to do with a character that is that powerful. There's all these other things they could have done with him, stories they could have told, battles he could have had. No, he's just sitting around cooking food, stuff like that, and then getting wiped out very early on in Infinity War. But easily coming in first place is Quicksilver. Joss Whedon has stated in interviews going way back that he believes if you're gonna have war, you have to have casualties. So he always wants to make sure that somebody dies in his film so you can actually feel the stakes. But when it came to what he decided to do with Age of Ultron, he introduced a character, they cast a really good actor to play him that has all the talent to continue being in the universe and be a solid part of the Avengers moving forward. And then instead of killing off one of these characters that they established before that we're more connected with, they kill off the guy that was a villain for the first half of this movie. As soon as he's redeemed, as soon as he becomes a hero, as soon as he's interesting and has banter back and forth with Hawkeye, they kill him off. And it just felt like a cheap way to have death and have stakes without us really caring because they never developed the character. They never did anything with him. And so once again, you have this character that has powerful infinity stones, comes from this country, solid actor, killed as soon as he becomes interesting. So without question for me, he is the biggest waste in the MCU of where they should have done something more. They could have done something more. No, they took the cheap, easy way out so he could be the person that dies. So he comes in at number 1. If you've enjoyed this video and want more like it, there's a companion video on my Patreon page. You can check that out at the link down in the description. If you want more MCU rankings, I got a whole playlist full of them right over there. If you've enjoyed this video, there's definitely something there that you'll like. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.